Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer, and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today's breaking news is that Ukrainian drone attacks have ravaged the Russian Federation's southern regions once again, and not only were they able to knock out 4 Russian oil refineries, but a Russian friendly fire incident also occurred in the chaos, resulting in the loss of 4 Russian service members. In the area of Krasnodar, we were able to get the largest amount of news of drone impacts hitting the oil refineries just outside the city, and we were able to get one small video clip right here. From what we understand, the drones were launched in a number over 100, although we still do not have an exact number that was published by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. These drones attacked vital targets along the entire southern region of the Russian Federation, hoping to either knock out Russian critical infrastructure or Russian military abilities that would help them to continue to wage war within the occupied territories of Ukraine. We were able to hear from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense the losses in detail. According to the General Staff, they reported that successful strikes on 4 Russian oil refineries in Afip, Ilya, Krasnodar, and Astrakhan, along with a radar installation and electronic intelligence center in Bryansk in occupied Crimea, were also destroyed. We were also able to get additional information that this comes upon the drone attack from last night that also conducted some incredibly severe damage to other oil refineries within the Krasnodar area and also struck a Russian airfield near to the city of Yeysk inside of the Taganrov Gulf region. However, the drone attack from last night appears to have been extremely devastating to the Russian industry, the Russian oil and war production, and not only that, was apparently overwhelming Russian air defenses so greatly, they began to pick up a anything that flies will be shot down mantra while trying to deal with the mass influx of drones that were flooding Russian skies, and practically no air defense was usable against them. We were able to hear that a Russian air defense around the small town of Anapa, just close to the area of the Kerch Strait, ended up accidentally shooting down a Russian Ka-29 that was conducting screening operations for the bridge defensive perimeter inside the Kerch Strait. Apparently, according to the information that we were able to find, the Kamarov 29 was shot down and all 4 Russian soldiers were killed on board the helicopter in the process of it being engaged by Russian air defense and destroyed. This is once again showing us that Russian air defense is incredibly low in number, and not only that, with the amount of air targets that were flying into Russia in the form of 100 drones at a minimum, Russian air defense is so overwhelmed they will engage and shoot down absolutely anything in the skies, also showing that there is a massive lack of coordination and communication in the air defense forces, and giving us a very good idea that the Ukrainians can largely take advantage of this confusion, either to make sure that Russian air defense does not engage incoming Ukrainian air defense targets, or they may engage their own air forces in the area and end up shooting them down. There was a fairly famous incident that occurred a while ago up in the area of Novochervensovskaya, just south of Yeysk, where an A-50 mainstay command aircraft was shot down supposedly by Ukrainian air forces, although we still have a decent amount of assumptions that could lead to people saying that Russian air defense was in fact the ones to shoot down the A-50 in an accidental friendly fire incident. We don't know that for certain, but we are starting to see that friendly fire incidents are certainly elevating and increasing in number as the Russian Federation now sees that their remaining air defense systems are being wildly overwhelmed and communication has practically broken down in any meaningful form amongst the air defense radars and the air defense batteries. Moving on from that and into the area of Rostov-on-Don, we were able to hear that a military warehouse caught on fire in the city. Rostov-on-Don is the military headquarters of the Southern Military District of the Russian Federation, the district that is responsible for conducting the war in Ukraine. Now we can see this military warehouse inside the city has caught on fire. As we are talking right now, this fire continues to burn. The news of this just came out a few hours ago, and it does appear that fire brigades are on scene, but the fires have not been quelled at the moment, according to our information. We are not sure why the warehouse caught on fire. We are expecting that it is most likely Ukrainian partisan activity that has set the warehouse on fire, but once again, we don't know exactly certain. It could have been a workplace incident leading to a fire that's begun to spread. It could be a wide variety of things. It could have simply been an electrical fire that started to burn down the entire warehouse. But once again, military equipment that is in the Southern Military District, which means that it certainly would have been used eventually inside of occupied Ukraine, has now been lost, and the Russian Federation seems to have no aim seems, or no ability to reproduce or restore the losses that they have sustained within that military warehouse, at least on a short-term picture. Moving on from that and into Moscow, speaking of a short-term picture, the short-term picture for the Russian Federation's manpower situation appears to be incredibly grave, as more Russian Federation soldiers are needed to be able to try and fight the wars in Ukraine and to continue to push through the never-ending meat grinder that has become the several hundred mile long front line. We got to see that because of this, a massive raid occurred on a Moscow market today by the Russian state police to try and bring out more conscripts, more fodder for the Russian war effort. And we were able to see this right here. As you can see, while you can't really see this all too well, this mass group of men that's over here in this corner are actually all men. There are no women included in this group. And this is once again showing us very clearly that this is an attempt by the Russians to conduct a raid to find able-bodied men and then press them into military service. At least that's the reports that we've been getting so far, and it does show that the Russian Federation is getting at its absolute desperate to pretty much start press ganging Russian citizens into military service. For those of y'all who do not know what press ganging is, press ganging was an old practice from the early to mid 19th century where British Royal Navy service members would scour the docks for able-bodied men, and if they were able to find some, they would kidnap them and then throw them onto Royal Navy warships to serve a set amount of time, or pretty much live on them until they eventually succumb to some sort of a disease. That is something very similar that we're seeing that the Russians are doing in the modern day, and it is showing us that they are having an incredibly hard time pulling anyone into the Russian armed forces any longer. Meanwhile, we were also able to get news from the Netherlands that things will not be getting any better, at least for the overall big picture of the war, as the Netherlands and another anonymous country will be providing 2 Patriot air defense systems to Ukraine. That was according to the Dutch Defense Minister Kassa Ollongren, who stated that today, and that was reported by the Times here in the United States. We are getting an idea that Patriot defense systems have become a top priority, not just to the Western world, but to the Ukrainian government, as the war is clearly going to be taking quite some time. Many people have started to realize, including analysts, both in Ukraine and also here in the United States, that a decisive victory on the battlefield is no longer achievable for both sides. It is truly a pure-on-pure conflict, and while defensive battles will always end up in an overwhelming victory for the defender, offensive battles seem to be having a much different picture with much different and skewed results, showing that no one is ever able to really win in an offensive victory anymore in this war. That means that this is going to be a war of attrition, and whoever is able to win the attrition war will win the war overall. And we can see that the United States and many Western countries are starting to realize this along with Ukraine and are providing Ukraine systems like Patriots, air defense systems, that would help them to sustain less damage to their war industry and therefore be attrited at a much slower pace than they would have been otherwise. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, due to the rising tensions inside of the Korean Peninsula, we've also been able to hear that South Korea may start to supply Ukraine with air defense and artillery systems and artillery shells in the future due to aggression by the Russian Federation and their support of the North Koreans on the peninsula. According to the statement that we were able to get today from the Yonhap News Agency, a major news agency and publisher within South Korea, we were able to hear that there are various options for providing weapons, and our position on the latest developments between the Russian Federation and North Korea depends on how Russia approaches the situation in the future. And that's what the South Korean presidential administration has made official on the topic today. It does seem as though the South Koreans are beginning to eyeball, or at least get a very clear telltale sign, that the Russian Federation is attempting to brew up conflict on the Korean Peninsula, possibly as a diplomatic negotiating chip, to try and get concessions on what's going on with Ukraine and Western support for the state of Ukraine. Going off of this, South Korea doesn't appear to be that big of a fan of this kind of a Russian aggression or this kind of a Russian attempt at using the Korean Peninsula as a diplomatic negotiating chip, and so they've decided that they are going to begin to screw the Russians over in Ukraine by now supporting Ukraine with a large amount of military equipment. Many people would largely sleep on the South Koreans as far as an economic and military power, but the fact of the matter is that South Korea is probably one of the most armed-to-the-teeth nations within the area of East Asia that is a part of the Western sphere. South Korea is one of the biggest arms manufacturers as well, to the point that not only are they able to manufacture their own in-house defense equipment, such as the K-2 Panther, a main battle tank designed indigenously within South Korea, They are also able to sell the concept abroad. Poland is a country that is made up almost entirely of South Korean defense systems. The Crab is actually a modification of the K-7 Thunder, which is an SPG used by South Korea. And not only that, Poland will be licensed building South Korean APCs and the K2 Panther in the future to pretty much create an entirely Polish armed force with modern equipment, but all based completely off of South Korean designs. Not only that, but Samsung Heavy Industries within South Korea is also a major manufacturer of artillery munitions, specifically in the form of 155mm artillery shells, and not only that, produces an incredibly wide variety of all forms of military equipment. And this will be giving the South Koreans a massive market to continue to support their war industry with in the form of Ukraine. And not only that, it will also be putting the Russians into an even worse spot, considering that this may now be backfiring on the Russians on what's happening with the Korean Peninsula. Meanwhile, we have also been able to hear that the Chinese and the United States have had informal nuclear talks just over the past few days, and according to the statements that we were able to hear, it seems as though the United States was concerned that if the Chinese began to lose a conflict involving the island of Taiwan, that they would begin to threaten or use nuclear weapons in limited form against the Republic of China, also known by many people as Taiwan. However, the Chinese representatives in these informal talks stated that they were fully confident in the victory of their armed forces in conventional means without the use of nuclear arms, and so the country's authorities would not threaten the use of nuclear weapons. However, that statement is a little bit odd and leaving a lot of ambiguity. They are saying that they are certain that the conventional armed forces of the People's Republic of China would be able to win in the conflict against Taiwan practically hands down. It is not accounting for the fact that if there was to be a defeat of the Chinese in the seas and skies around Taiwan, that they would possibly start to try and use tactical nuclear weapons on specific sites on the island. That is not being factored in, and off of that, we may still consider that there is a possible nuclear threat against the Taiwanese if a conventional conflict in between the two was to start not favoring the People's Republic of China. And there is a high likelihood that it may not, especially considering that the Taiwanese are heavily investing currently in anti-ship and anti-air defenses, really above all else. They probably may be able to withstand or sustain themselves during a Chinese air and naval campaign and make sure that a ground invasion would never be suitable or never be possible on the island due to the failure of that mass bombardment. Going off of that, that is entirely possible that the Chinese could still threaten the use or use tactical nuclear weapons on Taiwan, and it appears that talks have been unfruitful so far, but will most likely be revisited again in the future due to the pertinence and also the possibility of such an action being conducted against Taiwan. But with that, that is all of the major breaking news that we have today. I've got to thank everyone so much once again for watching this channel and enjoying the short war videos that we put out. And if you've really enjoyed this video today, please make sure to subscribe. It makes us incredibly happy. Now, of course, a lot of people usually say, oh, subscribing helps the channel. And actually, funnily enough, doesn't. YouTube removed that from the algorithm a while ago. So subscribers only make us really happy on running the channel and also keep y'all a little bit updated on the news updates that we put out if you hit the bell button when you subscribe. Also, make sure to like, if you want to, make sure to like the video. It does make us really happy when we see that as well. And make sure to comment down below and let me know what you think of the video and let me know your thoughts about things that are going on around the world and the news that we covered today. And also, if you really enjoyed this channel and you would like to help to make these video projects possible, make sure to support us on Patreon. The link is in the description for that below, and I got to give a huge shout out to all of our patrons who are currently on Patreon for continuously supporting this channel and helping to make video projects like these a reality on a near day-to-day basis. And so with that, I thank you all so much once again for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.